Hey everyone, it's the Miserable Movie Man back once again with another video. So I recently saw Hong Kong's first disaster movie, Cesium Fallout, and wanted to give my thoughts. The movie's been out for a while now, and I was quite looking forward to it because the trailers look pretty good. But I wanted to compare it to some of the Hollywood disaster movies that have been and gone, like The Day After Tomorrow or 2012. And see how this one compared. Now, of course, Hollywood does everything big budget, great special effects, but also some of those disaster movies have ridiculous elements in, and it almost is 24-esque in writers trying to come up with ways to put the characters in peril. So I wanted to see how Cesium Fallout compared, and I have to say, overall, it's about as silly as all the Hollywood films. Now, I think some of these elements were certainly done in the vein of trying to showcase bravery and strength and individual sacrifice, which is great. I mean, that's kind of what you want in each disaster movie. But when things get really ridiculous, when you have over-the-top caricature kind of villains, when you have acting that is pretty wooden in nature, then I don't think the overall package is kind of that great, to be honest. It's certainly something that I give credit for in terms of Hong Kong trying to do a big disaster movie, especially with all of the help from the other studios they have. And of course, Andy Lau is great and really carries the film. But there is a lot of stupidity in it, and I'll get into that in a minute. First, I want to say, though, that this is a confusing film. The effects and the timelines don't always make everything clear. I wasn't sure exactly what time it was set in because originally you have a little opening scene of what happens in 1999 as the sort of handover goes on, and Andy Lau is a foreign secretary type guy who is changing the customs procedures and regulations to allow more trade to go through, but that leads to more illegal shipping, and there's a big fire at the shipping container area. And that leads to the death of the sister of one of the key heroes. Now, as a strange coincidence, it turns out that sister is also the wife of Andy Lau. But really, they focus more on the grief of the brother than they did of the husband. And that was a very strange choice for me, because we found out fairly soon afterwards that they have a daughter too. Andy Lau has a daughter who obviously lost her mother as a firefighter due to the lax regime creating more flammable materials coming through the ports and not being checked properly, and a big fire that led to his sister dying. So it was kind of weird that they focused on the grief of the brother, although, Andy Lau rushes to the scene and you're wondering why is the foreign secretary coming to the scene, and then you see him cradling the helmet and you're thinking, why is he cradling the helmet? But you kind of find out a bit later on. I mean, these kind of twists don't work well if it's really a ridiculous coincidence, kind of already jumped the shark in the first few minutes of the film. But it wasn't that clear until a bit later on that was Andy Lau's wife and the sister of the firefighter. It was interesting as well that the Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi immigrants were the dodgy guys that started the fire. Great that they're having some ethnic minorities in the film. That was really wonderful to see, but actually those guys who had a few lines and really caused all the problems, not even credited in IMDb, which is a shame. I mean, I think Hong Kong was getting more and more progressive, but maybe it's not. It could just be an IMDb thing that I couldn't see those guys and who the actors were. They actually did an okay job, I thought, but they were minor characters just there to start the fire and be complained about later on by one of the old residents, and we'll get to that in a minute. But again, there was too much suspension of disbelief for me in this film. There were times where the film really just was all over the place, and maybe I have to watch it again to kind of make sense of it. But the team that was closest to the explosion initially survived the fire. Later on, people were going in and out saying it was radioactive, but it wasn't, and some levels were higher and they weren't. And some areas survived much better than others, but then, the damage to sort of surrounding areas seemed way more extensive than the damage that was closer to the fire. So it was kind of an interesting scenario in they played fast and loose with the kind of rules. So again, I kept sort of wondering and questioning what was going on based on some events really not making sense. I thought the CGI was, I mean, this is not a Hollywood film, so I want to give it a pass, but it was weak to me. There was just too many elements of kind of strange and poor looking CGI throughout this film. And, you know, you get these small plot lines where you have secondary characters like Water and Finger and Chainsmoker. And these characters are not introduced well enough or given enough screen time for you to really care about them. It's one of those situations where, you know, if you want to split people up, if you want to have people die, if you want to have the usual cliche of Chainsmoker about to being retired but being called out on his last day and not making it out and giving a brave sacrifice, you need more scenes of these characters for us to really care and give a crap. Otherwise, you know, having them split up and die individually does not have the emotional impact of the resonance that you really want it for in a film like this. So I didn't think that was well done. Michael Wong playing the most Michael Wong of Michael Wong characters, being, you know, creepy, sleazy businessman. You find out later on towards the end of the film why he's kind of smiling and smoking his cigars and saying everything is okay. But again, are they introducing these things to create drama and intrigue without really explaining them until the end of the film? That did not work well for me. You need a little bit more information there for the audience to really sort of want to understand his character or want to root against his character. I thought some of the acting was okay. I thought the main firefighter dude, I'll have to look up his name, and Andy Lau were good. I thought a lot of the others were not great. I mean, when the madam shouted evacuate, they didn't seem to have any urgency at all. I thought Karen Mott was pretty wooden in her acting. She tries to be all stern and very, you know, trying to portray a sense of gravitas, but that didn't work. And then by the end of it, she was still, even though her arc changed her a little bit, it wasn't that good for me. I thought some of the writing was quite poor, and maybe it was the English translations, but when you look at the subtitles, it's such, I guess, basic level writing to throw in lines like Simon is the best, Simon is the worst. You know, it's those types of translations and language that give this film a kind of cheap writing element to me. And, you know, stuff like, as long as reason is on our side, I'll back you up. It's things like that would not, I guess, make sense to me in the context of a senior government level meeting, as well as the fact that no one seems to have read the report in a catastrophe that could potentially kill millions in Hong Kong. The observatory head doesn't say anything and seems pretty meek and mild and weak during the film. So you know, when she shouts "take minutes," it just sounds so off. You know, the interactions between the government officials and Andy Lau seem very cliched and forced for like a human interaction. It was almost as if, you know, you get a kid to write a scene where you want to create a bit of drama and tension without really portraying it in a realistic way or in a way that allows the audience to sort of understand slowly by slowly the gravity of the situation. It's very much, I guess, stereotypical, over-the-top, nonsensical, unbelievable caricatures of government officials who desperately trying to save their own skin and care more about themselves and their own families than saving millions and millions of people. So it's kind of a weird portrayal of that. I wasn't really a fan of that sort of scene. It's funny towards the end of the film when the firefighters are trying to save their friends, they can't find a way in. The old man, again, complains about these South Asian illegal labourers and gives them a way in. And then the firefighters do the usual cliched Hollywood thing. We're going to go against our orders to save our friends. So I thought that initially everyone's following orders to the letter, and then right at the end they try and be these great heroes to say that their one friend is better than trying to contain the whole area and make sure everyone else is okay. So these decisions were not rational. They didn't make a lot of sense. I kind of didn't get why the fire typhoon hit the helicopter. I mean, is that because that's where the materials were and it was way more combustible and flammable than other areas, and that's why the typhoon shot straight up and damaged the helicopter? But of course, the helicopter rotor blade coming straight to where the firefighters are is pinpoint precision accuracy. And again, one of these things that did not make a lot of sense. If they had something, because they started showing the containers being a little bit a little bit unsafe, a little bit loose, but, potentially about to tip. If they'd had the helicopter crash into something and create sort of some kind of shockwave or sonic blast that made things shake, and then have the container start to fall, I thought that would have been much better. But to have the rotor blade just go straight to the point where it's about to hit the firefighter's head, that's ridiculous. And then, who was the injured guy? Was it Water or Finger? I mean, he didn't even remember he got injured until he started bleeding. So he's carrying this guy along. He'd actually fallen straight onto a really sharp object, and that must have hurt. Was he in so much shock that his brain blacked out the memory of falling onto something? Or was it just, again, lazy writing and ridiculous circumstance that forced that? The CGI that they did of the abandoned Hong Kong landmarks and areas, which was in the trailer and looked great, I would have loved that to have actually been more real in terms of actually happening than these. They kept showing us these imaginary sequences because, and the line at the end of the film is, this is an imaginary tale, but it's really not far away, I mean, it could really happen any time. Those are I'll say they cheat the audience. You spend all this money on this CGI scene only to have it really not have the impact in the film that it should do because it's imaginary or someone is dreaming it or something. It's a bit ridiculous. Language-wise, I thought the film strayed a little bit. You have full speech in Cantonese right at the start. All the Guaylo are sitting there and they all understand it perfectly, which is never going to be the case. You had some, as I said, some translations that didn't make sense. The middle part where there's all these texts talking about potential radiation leakage and, what potentially could be happening, that wasn't translated for an English-speaking audience, so I was disappointed there, even though there was a line later on that kind of says, the stereotype of a very strong, hard, crazy female leader, I think, has been done to death, so you didn't need to see that, but it was interesting to see the way they portrayed the acting chief secretary as being a woman of really just no brains whatsoever, and that wasn't great. I mean, when Simon or Andy says, your families are not the only ones with the right to information, yeah, you can, they give her reasons for saying, the panic will be worse, and this film is very clear that if this really happened, you can't evacuate Hong Kong. It's too densely populated. Where's everyone going to go? There's not enough space here. But, I didn't think that was portrayed very well, and I thought the government was, obviously Andy Lau has to be the hero, but almost everyone in the government was too afraid to speak up. They knew they were doing the wrong things, and the stern female leader who's trying to make a name for herself is the one who is the cause of a lot of the problems because she's really making decisions in her own best interests, and that isn't something that I think is realistic. It's funny to me the way they showed all the little touches of people trying to help in Hong Kong. I think one thing is great about Hong Kong people is they're always trying to help each other, back each other up. You had lots of little touches of that where people are moving the truck and they're helping when people run out of groceries. Of course, we did see it for real when the groceries were being bought during COVID. No one was really helping each other. It was everyone for themselves, and it's nice to see a fictional portrayal of how helpful people can be, even though you do see some elements of that in real life. And of course, this is the only time I've ever seen anyone in Hong Kong make way for an ambulance. It was pretty fictional in that respect. It's just one ambulance, one guy, everyone makes way for the ambulance. So that never happens in real life. It was funny to see that Andy Lau himself went straight into the scene to remove the materials. He's the Nicolas Cage of this film. He goes in, not trained, wearing the hazmat suit, going through hazardous areas and having to deal with things not being easy to stand on and falling and slippery and stuff. That was an interesting one. The brave firefighter who rescued the Indian kid did all that rescue work before him to die and the kid dying. But the dad was okay, it seems, so he's lost his son. That's not great. Obviously, the traffic around the area of the evacuation was insane, and the news must have spread, but everyone in the island seemed to be driving normally. Cars seem to drive normally, can get to the government houses normally. Again, little things like this that just highlight the stupidity and the incredulous nature of some of the events in this film. And there were times where people were saying, we can't wait any longer. Yes, we can. No, we can't. Yes, we can. Okay, yes, then. Let's go. Again, these decisions were not particularly well portrayed. And the confidential file, which is very convenient, which was redacted to show that, Peter Cowan and DOE are the bad guys. Now, surely the chief executive has read this file. She's the acting chief executive. I mean, how much more senior can you get? So, again, these are little plot contrivances that were thrown in there to create tension, but actually make no sense on scrutiny. Some of the dubbing wasn't great as well. I mean, the dubbing of the grandma wasn't great. I think whatever the ADR was going on there didn't work. When they were eating the steak, that was quite bad. And again, some things that didn't make sense to me was, at the end, everyone sort of stands up just to save one life, and they don't care about the broader situation. There's no protective clothing, but water and the dad were okay. But only when they start to get to save him, then he gets symptoms, and then he dies. I thought it was funny how Observatory could predict the rain to the minute. I mean, the clock and the timer was based on the observatory prediction, and of course the rain came a little bit earlier, but it was almost about 10-second difference. So the ability of the Hong Kong Observatory to predict the rain with such a level of accuracy is insane. So that was quite funny. And we obviously had to get the heroic sacrifice at the end. There was a way in. They tried, it didn't work. Oh, there's another way. Let's blow up the flats. Again, that has to be precise. Oh, that's not going to be enough. Okay, we've got to blow the reservoir thing underneath. Okay, well, then we've got to do that. And then the guy who's doing the plan is also in there helping out. He almost doesn't get out in time. And then okay, let's see. How can we get 4 firefighters at the end in there? And how can we get them to be, heroic and sacrifice themselves? Oh, let's have a bit of lightning hit a pylon, and then one of the electrical wires comes down and shorts things, so they have to go and do everything manually. It's one of those things where every time, they create some ridiculous contrivance, almost like the wolves on the ship in 2012 were just having to be there to just chase people. You could have done it in a better way, I think. You could have come up with better logical reasons for them to be there. And of course, people are saying that, we lost... They lost hundreds and hundreds of people and died in all kinds of different circumstances, but losing 4 firefighters was too much for the government and the people there. That was, again, not consistent. They didn't even know the firefighters. It wasn't like they were their friends or whatever. It was just Andy Lau that knew the main guy. So it was one of those things where, if it was high stakes, make the stakes count from the events and the logic and the background info you get in the film, but don't just contrive these situations where people just act in a very silly or stupid manner just to create that drama or tension. The closing consequences were funny, as I said. It was like, a real-life documentary at times. This film was trying to show you what's going on and who's going to die and how Hong Kong is really going to be screwed if anything like this happens. Andy Lau still got 4 years, even though he managed to bring an international scandal to light and, went after the bad guys with his honor and integrity. I mean, maybe I have noticed like a kind of thing of Asian culture in some ways. To the underdog does have to have consequences to show that these things really did matter. I think a lot of Hollywood films, they would get off and you wouldn't see them doing anything. But you need those consequences, I think, for the cultural impact here. And that last line, though it may seem out of reach, maybe it's only a step away. Again, hugely contrived, but interesting that the way they're trying to portray this film. So I've rambled a lot. I've said a lot of things that I thought didn't make sense. Overall, I thought if you really are able to switch your brain off, this is an okay, enjoyable film. I mean, a valiant first attempt at Hong Kong's big disaster movie. Some of the acting was good, but the problem is that there's just too much stupidity in this film for me to truly enjoy it. The heroic bravery, the stoic nature, the caricatures of the government officials. I mean, it's all poorly handled for me. A few nice little human touches sprinkled throughout, but CGI was weak. As I said, the plot elements were hugely contrived to be nonsensical, and a lot of the acting was weak. The characters weren't introduced well enough for me to really care about a lot of them. Not given enough backstory or enough interaction. So overall, I will give this a 5 out of 10. If you love disaster movies, go see it. If you love Andy Lau, go see it. If you want to see a fictional take on really the horror that would happen in real life if this were to occur, Hong Kong would be absolutely messed up. Go go see it, but there's too many things that bring this film down for me to really enjoy it thoroughly. So there you go. That's my take. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I misinterpret anything? Was the Cantonese script better than the sort of poor English translations? Did things hit home better with local culture, local language than I was able to glean from it? Or did you agree with what I said? I'd be very interested to see what you think in the comments as usual. Please share this video to help to support the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, catch you next time.